Hello, it's Nancy. Today you will learn how to create a garden according to Garden Scroll. Number 1, start dreaming. Taking the time to dream is the first constructive step toward anything. Decide what area you want to put your garden in. Remembering, you may want to grow a larger garden, or you may decide you want a smaller area. Gardening is work. It's also addictive in that you'll want to try all your old favorites and new plants. New ones come out every year. The depth of your garden will help determine the tallest plants for your back border. Will you be able to plant trees and still have room for rows or clumps of flowers in front of them? Staggering plants from the tall to the medium tall to the short? Or would shrubs and bushes be a better size to start with to leave room for plants in front of them in your garden? It's best to have some sunny spots and some shade spots in your garden because most likely you'll want to plant some plants that will require shade and other plants that will require sun. Amending your soil is a wise decision. I just cleaned out a place in my garden and put some potting soil in and planted my plant, but my garden is still in need of some amending of the soil. The bones of your garden are the structures and the trees are shrubs. Make some of them evergreen so that you can enjoy them in the winter and birds will have a place to hide from predators. You can also add your tall plants on the back row or back border, or I like to think of the garden area as one great big container garden, and you can plant your taller plants wherever you want so that, like if you put them in the middle and then have your garden all around it, and you can sit under your tree and look out and see all of your garden, or just where you can see it from the position that you want to be able to view your garden. Green is a lovely color. Like my cousin said when she once told me it was her favorite color, and if I looked around, I would see that it must also be God's favorite color. But blue-green, yellow-green, and burgundy foliage break up the green and also bring out green's various shades even more. Straight rows, each row all the same kind of flower, as in roses in the back, daylilies in the middle, and candy tuft at the front border, are really pretty, and they work well in places. They also may die out in places and leave a gap, and you may have, if you are able to find a replacement plant at the time you need it, it will be a smaller plant for a little while. But also keep in mind that plants grow to be around the very same size as their designated plant. Just if it's the same plant, it'll grow that size, whether it's grown from a division of that same plant or whether it's grown from a seed, a root, or a plant that you purchased at a nursery. You can also put a mix of heights as long as they're taller than the plants you plan to plant in front of them, and use different textures and the leaf, some of them broad and some of them just the tiny filigree leaves. So much you can go and put into your garden in the planning of it. Sometimes it's just easier to find a plant of the same or similar size for a replacement plant than it is to find the exact same kind of plant. You may also just change your mind about a certain plant and that way you can pop it out and replace it with a new plant that you want to try or an old favorite you know you love. Be wise about your choice of plants, or learn as you go like I did. I tried large sunflowers and morning glories as some of my back border flowers. Just imagine. I know, how beautiful. But the second year, sunflowers and morning glories sprang up everywhere from seed. As beautiful as they were, I learned why you might not want them in your garden. I spent approximately 3 years just pulling up seeds that came up from that first planting that I did. I shudder to imagine what would happen if I'd let the seeds go 2 years. Just a little heads up, be careful about plants that spread quickly by the root. They too can become invasive. When plants are small, it's hard to visualize them as big as they will eventually get. Leave them room to grow, or, like I did in some places in my garden, just divide them when they're too big for their spot and relocate them, the ones that outgrew their spot, to a different place in your garden. Remember to check to see if your plants take sun or shade and plant accordingly. If your shade tree dies, well, that's where my garden is right now. I need to plant new trees in 2 places or move my shade plants to a shade somewhere else, which I don't really have another shade that much. I do want 2 more trees, but they probably won't be big enough to provide instant shade. Number 3, choose your plants. Just checking out the plants in your neighborhood will give you great ideas. You're sure to see some you'll want to try. Plus, if they grow for your neighbors, the conditions are probably favorable for you to grow them too. Check your local nurseries and flower catalogs. Learn your planting zone and always check to see if the plant you want will grow in that zone. Many plants can be grown through the gardening season anyway, but they will die out when winter comes and the temperatures drop, unless you can bring them inside or, dreaming big, into a greenhouse. Many of those types of plants are grown as annuals. They die back in the winter and have to be purchased again when spring planting comes in the spring. Which brings me to the choice you'll need to make of whether you want annuals or perennials. Annual plants grow annually, or 1 year's gardening season. Perennials come back every year for years. Some live more years than others. Some are evergreen, and some are deciduous, meaning they will die back to the ground, but their roots will live, and in the spring they will begin growing again. Annuals only live for 1 year, but they also bloom all summer for continuous color, and many of them reseed themselves to come back the next year. Some annuals I wouldn't want to be without are zinnias, rose moss, petunias, calabachoa, those little mini petunias, geraniums, periwinkles, alternanthera, and coleus, and several more. Perennials have to have all their dead stalks cut back in the spring to tidy them up for their new growth as they start all over again. Perennials' bloom time are usually very short, some even only for 1 day, but then they usually put up more buds and more blooms the following day. But their bloom time basically is not as long as the annuals are, so you need to plant several with several different bloom times, several different kinds and types of perennials with several different bloom times to keep the color going in your garden. Some examples of perennials are chrysanthemums, garden phlox, bee balm, perennial salvia, hostas, daisies, and many more. Most gardeners decide on both annuals and perennials. That's what I decided on. Also remember bulbs and rhizomes like tulips, iris, and dahlias. Number 4, add character and dimension. It's time to dream and visualize some more. I like to add birdhouses on poles and colorful pots along with bird baths and garden art decor, vines growing on trellises, obelisks, and or arbors. I have a small water garden growing in a plastic barrel that doubles as a fountain. The beautiful Japanese iris made me do it. Lots of pretty flowers take either a water or bog garden. Dreaming big again, you could even have a pond with a bridge. I have one, but it's still in my mind visually. That's where my 3-tiered fountain is also. But I have left a space for it in my garden. Your garden will also bring pretty butterflies and birds. They love any water feature, and of course birdseed, put that in your garden, but be sure to roast it first or it will be an unwelcome guest growing like a weed. You'll find many other things to consider in your garden, like your garden path. You'll need a way to get through your garden to care for it and to water it, which is another thing, that a way to water, which I still have not got mine the way I need it because it takes me much too long to water. I need to get that figured out too. But you'll need to do that, and also have inviting places to sit in your garden. You may not get to sit there. You may be too busy like I was this last year. But it's always wonderful to dream that you might get to, and it's just so nice, even if it's just to take a glass of ice water while you're sitting there, to look out at your garden and all around you see the beauty happening. Which brings us to number 5, last but not least. Check your garden out each season or as often as you can. Make notes so that you'll remember, because as the season goes, there'll be many more things you'll want to do. But if you can find the time, keep as much of a record as you can and just look out and see where you need more color or a different plant, a different size plant, or if your plant is getting enough sun or enough shade, whatever it happens to need. And just like getting old, gardening is not for the faint of heart. The garden is always changing. You'll never get it perfect and be able to quit. It's a living, growing thing. Some plants in your garden will die due to rodents, insects, extremes in the weather, and other reasons that just come along. But just as we love life, even with all its ups and downs, there's nothing to delight your senses and put a smile on your face like a garden with all its beauty and daily surprises. I would also like to say concerning perennials, not to give up. Don't give up on them too soon because it takes a while. You have to be patient because they take their time. It usually takes 3 to 4 years actually. And there's a little saying that says the first year they sleep, and the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. So just a reminder to don't give up on them while you're waiting those years. They're putting down their roots. They're going to grow for you. In all likelihood, they'll become great beauties. Examples of tall backborder plants are giant elephant ears, hollyhocks, dahlias, Josie reblooming lilacs, snowball bushes, forsythias, hydrangeas, and roses and clematis growing on trellises. Examples of mid-sized plants are coneflowers, bee balm, garden phlox, daisies, daylilies, cosmos, and some of the zinnias that are the right size. Examples of shorter front border plants are candytuft, marigolds, alyssum, hardy geraniums, coreopsis, and short varieties of zinnias and moss phlox. Also, when you are planting your flowers for different seasons to cover all the seasons, don't forget your bulbs like your tulips, your iris, the allium bulbs, the gladiolas, and even the magic lilies. And while not a bulb, pansies, don't forget them because they bloom and grow even in winter. I'm persuaded that the little plants need our love, and just as much persuaded that we need to love someone or something or both. And so just start dreaming and plan your garden, and then put all the work into it that it takes to make your dream come true, and walk in the garden with God, because He's our first original gardener and the one that gives us all of our dreams and makes all of our hopes and dreams a reality. Please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel.